Section 3 of A Cruising Voyage Around the World. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Kay Hand. A Cruising Voyage Around the World by Woodes Rogers. Ireland to Caribbean. Begun August 1st, 1708, and finished October 14th, 1711. By Captain Woodes Rogers, Commander-in-Chief. Though others, who give an account of their voyages, do generally attempt to imitate the style and method which is used by authors that write ashore, I rather choose to keep to the language of the sea, which is more genuine and natural for a mariner. And because voyages of this sort have commonly miscarried, 'tis necessary that I should keep to my original journal, that the methods we took to succeed in our designs may appear from time to time in their native light. Therefore without any disguise I shall publish the copies of all our material regulations and agreements, and keep to the usual method of sea journals, omitting nothing that happened remarkable to ourselves, or that may serve for information or improvement to others in the like cases. Every day's transactions begin at the foregoing day about 12 o'clock, and end at the same hour the following day, carrying that date. Since custom has likewise prevailed for sailors to give an account of such countries upon whose coasts they touch or pass by, I shall so far comply with it as to give a description of those that occurred in the course of my navigation, especially of such as are or may be of most use for enlarging our trade, wherein I have consulted the best authors upon the subject and the manuscript journals of others, as well as informed myself by inquiry upon the spot, and from those that have been in the respective countries I treat of. 1708, August 2nd. Yesterday, about 4 in the afternoon, we weighed from King Road near Bristol, on board the Duke frigate, whereof Captain Woodes Rogers was commander, in consortship with the Dutchess, Captain Stephen Courtney, commander, both private men of war, bound to Cork in Ireland, and thence to the southward a cruising; the Duke burden about 320 tons, having 30 guns and 117 men, and the Dutchess burden about 260 tons by measure, 26 guns and 108 men, both well furnished with all necessaries on board for a distant undertaking. We had in company the Scipio, Peterborough frigate, Prince Eugene, Bristol galley, Berkeley galley, Beecher galley, Pompey galley, Sherstone galley, and Diamond sloop. At 10 at night, having little wind, we made the signal for the fleet to anchor between the Holmes and Minehead. We lay near 2 hours, and about 12 we fired a gun, and all came to sail, a fine gale at S.E. and E.S.E. We ran by Minehead at 6 in the morning, having stemmed the flood from the place we anchored at. We came up with a sloop about 10 o'clock, but she could not hold way with the fleet, being all light and clean ships, and good sailors. August 3rd. The wind veered to the northeast and east-northeast. Our ship and the Dutchess did not sail so well as the major part of the galleys, our masts and rigging being all unfit for the sea, our ships out of trim, and everything in disorder, being very indifferently manned. Notwithstanding our number, we had not 20 sailors in the ship, and it's very little better on board the Dutchess, which is a discouragement, only we hope to get some good sailors at Cork. We saw a sail at 5 last night, the Dutchess gave chase, and came near her; she seemed a large ship, but we lost sight of her at 8 o'clock. Being informed at Bristol that the Jersey, a French man of war, carrying 46 guns, was cruising betwixt England and Ireland, it obliged us to keep our hammocks up, and a clear ship for a fight, all night. About 2 this morning the rest of the fleet that lay astern of us came up, and we kept an easy sail, with a light out all night, but when day came we saw nothing, so that this proved a false alarm; which happened well for us, since had it been real, we should have made but an indifferent fight, for want of being better manned. August 4th. The Bristol galley, Berkeley galley, Prince Eugene, and the Beecher galley, being bound to the westward, left us at 6 in the evening. Little wind at E.S.E. and smooth water. August 5th. We saw the land, and finding we had overshot our port, came to an anchor at 12 o'clock off of the 2 rocks called the Sovereign Bollocks, near Kinsale, being calm. August 6. At about 8 last night we weighed with the flood, a small gale at east. It came on to blow and veered to the northward. We had a Kinsale pilot on board, who was like to have endangered our ship, it being dark and foggy. Before day he would have turned us into the next bay to the westward of Cork, had I not prevented it, which provoked me to chastise him for undertaking to pilot a ship, since he understood his business no better. The rest of our company, except the Diamond and Sherstone galley, got into Cork before us, only our consort stayed in the harbour's mouth till we came up with her. August 7. Yesterday at 3 in the afternoon we came to an anchor with our consort in the cove, wind at N.N.E. August 8. Came in the Arundel, a Queen's ship, and ordered us to strike our pendant, which we immediately did. All private commission ships being obliged by their instructions to pay that respect to all her Majesty's ships and fortifications. August 9. Yesterday afternoon came in the Hastings with the fleet under her convoy, which we left in King Road, as also the Elizabeth, a merchant ship of 500 tons, about 26 guns and well manned, with a fleet under her convoy from Liverpool, bound to the westward, with us and the Hastings, &c. Fair weather, the wind southerly. August 10. We were well pleased with the men Mr. Noblet Rogers got for us at Cork. Upon which we cleared several of those brought from Bristol, and some of 'em run away, being ordinary fellows, and not fit for our employment. August 11. It blowed fresh and dirty weather. We had 4 lighters from Cork to discharge our ships, that we might have them well stowed, and the provisions in the bottom when they came aboard us. We lengthened our mizzen mast 4 foot and a half, by placing it on a step on the gun deck, got our foremast forward, and did what we could in order to be in a better trim than before, against we had better men to work the ship, who lay all ready to come aboard from Cork. August 12. Blew fresh and dirty weather, we cleared and run near 40 of our fresh water sailors. The Shoreham Captain Saunders came hither to convoy a fleet back to Bristol. August 16. Continued dirty weather, so that we could not have an opportunity to heel our ship and clean her bottom, and were forced to keep our provisions covered in the lighter, and men to watch 'em. This morning about 10, one boat loaded with men came down from Cork to us. The fellows appeared to be brisk, but of several nations, and I sent to Mr. Rogers to stop the rest till we were ready, our ships being pestered. August 29. Nothing happened worth notice since the 16th, but that we had good weather to clean and tallow our ships 5 streaks below the water line, and to take in our provisions and men, &c. This morning we fell down to the Spit End by the Hastings man of war, as our consort did the night before. When I came without the Spit End, I saluted the Hastings with 7 guns. They returned 5, and I 3 for thanks. We had now above double the number of officers usual in privateers, and a large complement of men to each ship. We took this method of doubling our officers to prevent mutinies, which often happen in long voyages, and that we might have a large provision for a succession of officers in each ship, in case of mortality. Our ship was now so full that we sent our sheet cable and the other new store cordage to Mr. Noblet Rogers at Cork, to make room for our men and provisions. Having 3 cables besides, and being willing rather to spare that, than any thing else we had aboard. Our crew were continually marrying whilst we stayed at Cork, though they expected to sail immediately. Among others, there was a Dane coupled by a Romish priest to an Irish woman, without understanding a word of each other's language, so that they were forced to use an interpreter. Yet I perceived this pair seemed more afflicted at separation than any of the rest. The fellow continued melancholy for several days after we were at sea. The rest, understanding each other, drank their cans of flip till the last minute, concluded with a health to our good voyage and their happy meeting, and then parted unconcerned. I think it necessary to set down here the names of all the officers in both ships, with the number of our men, because it is proper that the persons whom this journal concerns should be known. Officers of the Duke. Woods Rogers, Captain, a mariner. Thomas Dover, a Doctor of Physic, second Captain, President of our Council, and Captain of the Marines. Carleton Van Brugh, merchant, now our owner's agent. Robert Fry, a mariner, chief lieutenant. Charles Pope, second lieutenant. Thomas Glendall, third lieutenant. John Bridge, master. William Dampier, pilot for the South Seas, who had been already 3 times there and twice round the world. Alexander Vaughan, chief mate. Lance Appleby, second mate. John Ballet, rated third mate, but designed surgeon if occasion. He had been Captain Dampier's doctor in his last unfortunate voyage round the world. Samuel Hopkins, being Dr. Dover's kinsman and an apothecary, was both an assistant to him and to act as his lieutenant if we landed a party anywhere under his command during the voyage. George Underhill and John Parker, 2 young lawyers designed to act as midshipmen. John Vigor, a reformado, to act as Captain Dover's ensign when ashore. Benjamin Parsons and Howell Nethel, midshipmen. Richard Edwards, coxswain of the pinnace, to receive midshipman's pay. James Wassa, surgeon. Charles May, his mate. John Lancy, assistant. Henry Oliphant, gunner, with 8 men called the gunner's crew. Nathaniel Scorch, carpenter. John Jones, his mate, with 3 assistants. Giles Cash, boatswain, and John Pillar, his mate. John Shepherd, cooper, with 2 assistants. John Johnson, Thomas Young, Charles Clovet, and John Bowden, all 4 quartermasters. John Finch, late wholesale oilman of London, now ship's steward. Henry Newkirk, sailmaker. Peter Vandenhend, smith and armourer. William Hopkins, ship's corporal. Captain Dover's sergeant, and cook to the officers. Bartholomew Burns, ship's cook. Officers of the Duchess. Stephen Courtney, captain, a mariner. Edward Cook, second captain. William Stretton, chief lieutenant. John Rogers, second lieutenant. John Connolly, third lieutenant. William Bath, owner's agent. George Milburn, master. Robert Knowlman, chief mate. Henry Duck, second. Simon Hatley, third. James Goodall, fourth, and William Page, fifth mate, with all other inferior officers much the same as aboard the Duke. Most of us, the chief officers, embraced this trip of privateering round the world to retrieve the losses we had sustained by the enemy. Our complement of sailors in both ships was 333, of which above 1/3 were foreigners from most nations. Several of Her Majesty's subjects on board were tinkerers, tailors, haymakers, pedlars, fiddlers, etc., 1 negro, and about 10 boys. With this mixed gang we hoped to be well manned, as soon as they had learnt the use of arms, and got their sea legs, which we doubted not soon to teach them, and bring them to discipline. September 1st. We took sailing orders, the better to keep company with the Hastings and fleet, and having agreed with our consort, Captain Courtney, on signals between us, which are so common that I need not insert them here, and appointed places of rendezvous in case of separation, and how long to lie for each other at every place, about 10 this morning we came to sail with the Hastings and about 20 merchant ships, bound to the southward and westward, wind at N. by W. We should have sailed yesterday, but could not weigh and cast our ships clear of the rest. Some at that time drove, and the Sherstone galley run quite ashore on the Spit. In the night it drew moderate weather, and Captain Paul got her off to sail with us. Our holds are full of provisions, our cables, a great deal of bread, and water casks between decks, and 183 men aboard the Duke, with 151 aboard the Dutchess, so that we are very much crowded and pestered ships, not fit to engage an enemy without throwing provision and stores overboard. September 2nd. We and our consort stood out of the fleet to chase a sail we saw to windward. Our ships sailed as well as any in the fleet, not excepting the man of war, so that we began to hope we should find our heels, since we go so well though deep loaden and pestered. We found the chase to be a small vessel coming into the fleet from Baltimore, 1 huntmaster, called the Hope Galley, a small French-built snow belonging to Mr. James Vaughan of Bristol, bound for Jamaica. Wind at N. by W., moderate weather. September 3rd. The wind very veerable from the W.S.W. to the N.W., blowed strong with squalls, so that we reefed often, and our ship was a little leaky in her upper works. September 4th. It blew fresh this morning, but not so much wind as yesterday, and the water smoother. Captain Paul made a signal for me, Captain Courtney and Captain Edwards, commander of the Scipio, and after speaking with him, he sent his boat for us, being larger than ours. We with Captain Dover and Mr. Vanbrugh went in with her and dined with Captain Paul aboard his ship, where we were very handsomely treated. He proposed to me and Consort, when he left the fleet, which would be very soon, to cruise a few days together off Cape Finisterre, after having asked us what we wanted that he could supply us with. He gave us scrubbers, iron scrapers for our ship's bottom, a speaking trumpet, and other things that we wanted; but he would accept nothing from us, because our voyage would be long, but told us he should be well pleased if our owners returned him the same necessaries for his ship when he returned. Wind from the N.N.W. to the N.W. by W. moderate. September 5. We came from on board Captain Paul to our own ships yesterday at 6 in the afternoon, and now thought it fit to discover to our crew whither we were bound, that if any disorder should have risen upon it, we might have exchanged our malcontents whilst in company with one of her Majesty's ships. But I found no complaint on board the Duke, except from one fellow who expected to have been tithing man that year in his parish, and said his wife would be obliged to pay 40s in his absence; but seeing all the rest willing, he was easily quieted, and all hands drank to a good voyage. I and Captain Courtney writ to our owners, Alderman Batchelor and Company, in the same letter, a method we design to continue in the whole voyage, for all the things that related to it. A brisk gale and clear weather. September 6. The Hastings and we parted at 6 last night. The reason why we did not keep him longer company was our ships being very full and our Consort unwilling to lose time so near home, so that we were obliged to break measures with Captain Paul. I excused it to him and saluted him, which he answered, and wished us a prosperous undertaking. Winds N. by W. and clear weather. Our ship does not sail so well as she did 2 days before. The Crown Galley of Biddeford keeps us company bound for the Madeiras. Wind from N.N.W. to N. by E. September 8. Everything now begins to come into order, we having been hitherto in some confusion, as is usual in privateers at first setting out. We had a good observation. Moderate weather, wind at W.N.W. latitude 40° 10' north. This day the chief officers dined on board me, and the next day on board the Dutchess. September 9. Now we begin to consider the length of our voyage, and the many different climates we must pass, and the excessive cold which we cannot avoid, going about Cape Horn. At the same time we had but a slender stock of liquor, and our men but meanly clad, yet good liquor to sailors is preferable to clothing. Upon this we held our first committee to debate whether 'twas necessary for us to stop at Madeira, as follows. At a committee held on board the Duke frigate resolved by the general consent of the following persons. That both the ships Duke and Dutchess do touch at Madeira, to make a larger provision of liquors, the better to carry on our long undertaking, being but meanly stored for so large a number of men as are in both ships, and in case of separation between this place and Madeira, then to meet at the Island St. Vincent, one of the Cape de Verde Islands, to wood and water our ships. But if we miss one another at that island, or that the first ship finds it inconvenient for stopping, then to proceed to Praia on St. Jago, another of the same islands, to wait at both these islands 14 days, and then if the missing ship does not appear, the other to proceed to the Isle of Grande, in latitude 23° 30' south on the coast of Brazil, there to wait 3 weeks, and then if we don't meet, let the single ship proceed on the voyage according to the orders given from our owners. This is our opinion this 9th day of September, 1708. Thomas Dover, President, Stephen Courtney, Woodes Rogers, Edward Cook, William Dampier, Robert Fry, Charles Pope, Carleton Vanbrugh, Thomas Glendall, John Bridge, John Ballet. September 10th. At 6 in the morning we saw a sail; after speaking with our consort, we both chased. I gave the Dutchess about a mile start of us, in order to spread the more. It blew fresh with a great sea, and the chase being windward, we crowded extravagantly. Wind at northwest. September 11th. At 3 yesterday afternoon we came up with the chase, who bore down right upon us, shewing Swedish colours. I fired twice at her before she brought to, then went aboard her with my yawl, Captain Courtney's boat being just before me. We examined the Master, and found he came round Scotland and Ireland. We suspected he had contraband goods on board, because some of the men we found drunk told us they had gunpowder and cables. So we resolved to examine her strictly, put 12 men on board her, and kept the Swede's master and 12 of his men on board our ships. This morning, after we had examined the men and searched the ship, we found it difficult to be proved whether she was a prize; and not willing to hinder time to carry her into any harbour to examine her farther, we let her go without the least embezzlement. The master gave me 2 hams and some ruffed dried beef, and I gave him a dozen bottles of red streak cider. They saluted us at parting with 4 guns. She belonged to Stadt, near Hamburg, and was a frigate-built ship of 22 guns, about 270 tons. While I was on board the Swede yesterday, our men mutinied, the ringleaders being our boatswain and 3 other inferior officers. This morning, the chief officers having kept with me in the after part of the ship, we confined the authors of this disorder, in which there was not one foreigner concerned. We put 10 of the mutineers in irons, a sailor being first soundly whipped for exciting the rest to join him. Others less guilty I punished and discharged, but kept the chief officers all armed, fearing what might happen. The ship's company seeming too much inclined to favour the mutineers, made me the easier forgive. Some begged pardon, and others I was forced to wink at; however, they began to find their design frustrated, which was to make a prize of the Swede, who they alleged had much contraband goods aboard, though we could see none. Yet they obstinately insisted that we apparently gave away their interest by letting her go without plundering her. I laboured to convince them of the necessity of our making dispatch, and that if we could make her a prize, it would unman our ships too much to send her into any port, besides other disadvantages it might procure to ourselves and owners should we be mistaken, which pacified the major part. Our consort's men were at first very uneasy, but finding the malcontents quelled aboard our ship, they all kept quiet. September 12. Yesterday the wind was very little and veerable, and we had an observation, 34° 30' north. September 13. Those in irons discovered others who were ringleaders in the mutiny, whom we'd also punished, and confined one of them in irons with the rest. Alexander Winter was made boatswain, instead of Giles Cash, one of the mutineers. Fair pleasant weather, little wind at N W by W. September 14. I agreed with the captain of the Crown Galley to carry my boatswain, who was the most dangerous fellow among the mutineers, in irons with him to Madeiras. I did not at his first confinement think of sending him off, but this day a sailor came aft to the steerage door with near half the ship's company of sailors following him, and demanded the boatswain out of irons. I desired him to speak with me by himself on the quarter deck, which he did, where the officers assisted me, seized him, and made one of his chief comrades whip him. This method I thought best for breaking any unlawful friendship amongst themselves, which, with different correction to other offenders, allayed the tumult, so that now they began to submit quietly, and those in irons beg pardon, and promise amendment. This mutiny would not have been easily laid, were it not for the number of our officers, which we begin to find very necessary to bring our crew to order and discipline, which is always very difficult in privateers, and without which 'tis impossible to carry on any distant undertaking like ours. Fine pleasant weather and moderate gales. It being little wind and contrary, we agreed to pass by Madeiras, and cruise a little amongst the Canary Islands for liquor, to prevent loss of time. So we took leave of the Crown Galley, who was bound into Madeira. September 15. Last night we sent Giles Cash aboard her in irons, with several letters by the Commander at large to our owners. We parted at 12 o'clock at night, fair weather, very little wind, from W.N.W. to N by E, and had a very good observation. Latitude 31° 29' north. September 16. I discharged the prisoners from their irons, upon their humble submission and strict promises of good behaviour for time to come. While they continued in irons, they had sentries over them, and were fed with bread and water. Those that were officers we restored to their places, and everybody was ordered to obey them. John Pillar, the boatswain's mate, was advanced to be boatswain, so that we are all quiet again. About 8 this morning we saw land, and found it to be Salvage's Island, bearing S.S.W., distant 8 leagues, latitude 29° 45'. Wind very light and veerable, with fair clear weather. September 17. Moderate gales of wind. The Salvage's at a distance is not unlike the island Lundy in Bristol Channel, about 2 miles long, a high island. This morning we saw the Rock that appear'd to us a good League to the Southwest of the Island, and took it to be a Sail till we came near it. Little Wind between the N.N.E. and the West. September 18. At 4 yesterday in the Afternoon we came in sight of Pico Teneriff, bearing S W by W. distant about 8 Leagues. Steer'd S.S.E. and S.E. by S. for Grand Canaries. This morning about 5 a clock we spy'd a Sail under our Lee Bow, between the Islands of Grand Canaries and Forteventura. We chased her, and at 7 came up with her. Our Consort being a little ahead, fired a Gun, and made her bring to. She prov'd a Prize, being a Spanish Bark about 25 Tuns, belonging to Oratava on Teneriff, and bound to Forteventura, with about 45 Passengers, who rejoiced when they found us English, because they fear'd we were Turks. Amongst the Prisoners were 4 Friars, and one of them the Padre Guardian for the Island Forteventura, a good honest old Fellow. We made him heartily merry, drinking King Charles III.'s Health, but the rest were of the wrong sort. We us'd them all very well, without searching them, &c. Fresh Gales and fair Weather, Wind from the N.N.E. to the E.S.E. September 19. After we had took the Prize, we stood to the Westward for Teneriff, in order to have her ransom'd, where our Agent, Mr. Vanbrugh, press'd to go ashore with some of the Prisoners. At 11 last night, the Wind being at N.E. when we were very near the shore, we could hardly weather Cape Nago, the easternmost part of Teneriff, till the Wind veer'd to the Northward. We stood off till day. In the morning it proved moderate, so we stood in for Oratava, and sent the Spanish Master of the Bark to it in his Boat, being mann'd with some of the Prisoners. Mr. Vanbrugh still insisting to go ashore, I consented, though against my Judgment, and he went with them to treat for the ransom of the hull of the Bark, her small Cargo, which consisted in 2 Butts of Wine and 1 Hogshead of Brandy, and other small matters, we design'd for our own use in both Ships, the Agents of each being to take an account of it the first opportunity. Fresh Gale of Wind at N.E. September 20. About 8 this morning came a Boat off from Oratava with a Flag of Truce, and brought a Letter signifying that unless we would immediately restore the Bark and Cargo, Mr. Vanbrugh should be detained. I sent to Captain Courtney, who agreed with me on an answer. We stood in with our Ships within a League of the Town, to tow in the Boat for dispatch, and about 11 they went ashore again. Wind at N.E. by E. very fresh. The Letter sent us was as follows. Captain Rogers and Captain Courtney. Gentlemen, Port Oratava, 20th September, 1708. Your Lieutenant coming ashore, and having given an account to our Governor of your having taken a Boat belonging to this place bound to Forteventura, we must inform you that her Majesty is graciously pleased to allow a Trade between her Subjects and the People of these Islands, whereof we suppose you are not ignorant; and that it is approved of not only by his Catholic Majesty, but also by the most gracious Christian King, who has sent express Orders unto his Consul here, that none of his Men of War or others shall molest any Ship trading to these Islands; and there has been actually an Example of a Ship belonging to the Subjects of her Britannic Majesty, which was taken by a French Privateer, and upon due application to the French Consul the Ship was restored. Wherefore we are all of opinion, that there can be no room for your making a prize of this Spanish Bark, for it will be extremely prejudicial to her Majesty's Subjects that reside here, and likewise to those in England trading hither, by prohibiting of all future Trade, by making more than sufficient reprisal upon our effects here, and perhaps on our persons, by reason of the evident breach on our part of the stipulated Trade which has been concerted with us. Wherefore we must once more desire you to restore the Spanish Bark, as you will answer the contrary before her Majesty, who has so far approved of the private Trade, that she was pleased to allow of 2 Men of War, viz. the Dartmouth Captain Cock, and the Greyhound Captain Harriet, the last year, who had express Orders to molest in no manner of way any Vessel belonging to the Spaniards, which accordingly they observed. Wherefore, as you have a due regard to what is so much the interest of her Majesty's Subjects, we expect at the return of this Boat, that you will make restitution of the said Bark, otherwise Mr. Vanbrugh will not be permitted to go off, and there will be extravagant reprisals made upon our estates and persons, which we expect you will take into your consideration, And we cannot omit to let you know that there is now a Spanish bark actually in England, which is daily expected with other English ships to load wine, which they will not be admitted to do in case you don't restore this bark. We don't doubt but the people here out of complaisance will make you some acknowledgment of a refreshment. Gentlemen, your very humble servants, J. Polden, Vice Consul, J. Cross, Bernard Walsh, G. Fitzgerald. Pray excuse haste that we have not time to transcribe. The rest of the merchants are in the city, where our governor generally resides, being about 6 leagues hence. Our answer was thus: On board the Duke frigate, September 20th. Gentlemen, we have yours, and observe its contents, but having no instructions given us with our commission relating to Spanish vessels trading amongst these islands, we can't justify the parting with this bark on your single opinions. It was Mr. Vanbrugh's misfortune to go ashore, and if he is detained, we can't help it. To have convinced us satisfactorily of what you say, you ought to have sent us a copy of Her Majesty's orders or proclamation, but we doubt there's no such thing in this case. If Mr. Vanbrugh is unjustly detained, we'll carry the prisoners we have on board to the port we are bound to, let the consequence be what it will. We are required to be accountable no further than we are obliged by our instructions, which we have given sufficient security already to follow, and don't fear a premunire when we comply with them. We know fishing boats are excused on both sides, and all trading vessels from Rio La Hache to the river of Chagre in the Spanish West Indies. We admire the master and passengers should be so ignorant of a thing so necessary to be known by 'em, for we never had the least word or intimation from them of what you write. The example you give us of a trade here allowed by the French King and Duke of Anjou, we don't admire it at, because it is for the benefit of the Spaniards, and we know the English ships are protected no farther than an anchor ground, and since we took this vessel at sea, we shan't part with her unless on our own terms. If you are positive in what you wrote us, and conscious what detriment it will be to the English trade, you have no way to prevent it, but immediately to ransom this bark. And if it be Her Majesty of Great Britain's pleasure, and we are better informed in England, then we can justify our conduct to the gentleman that employed us, and you will be again reimbursed. We shall wait but a short time for an answer, having water and provisions for ourselves and prisoners to the English settlements where we are bound. We are apprehensive you are obliged to give us this advice to gratify the Spaniards, and with respect are, Gentlemen, your humble servants, Woodes Rogers, Stephen Courtney. If you send us Mr. Vanbrugh and the man with him, we'll send you the prisoners, but will not part from the bark unless ransomed. Though the value is not much, we will not be imposed on. We desire you to use all manner of dispatch without loss of time, which we can't allow, nor answer it to our employers. September 21st. At 6 last night, the Spanish boat came again to us with dilatory answers to our last, insisting on behalf of the Spaniards that the goods should be returned 'em, though they consented to ransom the bark. To which we immediately returned an answer, for we were angry at their tediousness and our ill treatment, our time being precious, because we were informed that they expected every hour a small privateer that usually cruised off Madeira, as also a Spanish ship from the West Indies designed for Santa Cruz; so that it looked like a design to keep us here in suspense till these ships might get safely in, on the other side of the island. Our answer was to this effect, that it had not been out of respect to our officer on shore, we would not have stayed 1 minute, but would now stay till morning for their answer, and take a cruise among the islands some time longer than we intended, in order to make a reprisal; and though we could not land our men, would visit the town with our guns by 8 next morning; adding, that we hoped to meet with the governor's frigate, and should repay his civility in his own way, but wondered that they being Englishmen should trifle with us. The letter had its effect, for this morning at 8 o'clock we stood in close to the town, and spied a boat coming off, which proved to be one Mr. Cross, an English merchant, and Mr. Vanbrugh our agent with him, with wine, grapes, hogs, and other necessaries, for the ransom of the bark. Upon his coming up, we immediately went to work, discharged the bark, and parted the small cargo between our 2 ships. We treated Mr. Cross as well as we could, and at his desire gave the prisoners back as much as we could find of what belonged to their persons, particularly to the friars their books, crucifixes, and relics. We presented the old Padre Guardian with a cheese, and such as were stripped with other clothes; so that we parted very well satisfied on all sides. Mr. Cross told us the Spaniards ashore were very inquisitive whither we were bound, and understanding by the Prisoners that our Ships were sheath'd, and so full of Provisions, they suspected we design'd for the South Sea; and he inform'd us that 4 or 5 French Ships from 24 to 50 Guns sail'd thence about a month before on the same Voyage. But we did not think fit to own there that we were bound to any other place than the English West Indies. These Islands being so well known, I need not add any Description of them. We saw the Pike of Teneriff plain, but once while there, it being generally clouded. You may often see the top above the Clouds, when the rest is all covered with them. Now we are indifferently well stock'd with Liquor, and shall be the better able to endure the cold when we get the length of Cape Horn, which we are inform'd has always very cold bad Weather near it. September 22. Last night, just as we had finish'd with Mr. Cross, and deliver'd the Spaniards their Bark, we spy'd a Sail to the Westward of the Island, between 3 and 4 in the Evening. We immediately made what Sail we could, and steer'd W by N along the shore. At 8 a Clock we were in sight of Gomera, bearing S.S.W. distant 3 Leagues, Palma W by N distant 5 Leagues. We lost sight of the Sail before night, spoke with our Consort, and agreed to keep between Palma and Gomera in our Voyage, it being uncertain to meet with the Chase the next day, since last night she was near 5 Leagues from us; so that we believe she might get into a place of safety, if an Enemy, before we could see her. Besides there came on a stiff Gale, which put us quite out of hopes of seeing her again to advantage. Fair Weather, fresh Gales at N E by N. September 23. About 5 yesterday in the Afternoon, when at least 36 Leagues distant, we saw the Pico Teneriff very plain. Fine pleasant Weather, fresh Gales with smooth Water, Wind at N E by E. September 24. We sent our Boat for Captain Courtney, Captain Cook, Mr. Stratton, and Mr. Bath, their Agent, who stay'd and dined with us, and whilst they were aboard we held a Council, the result of which was as follows. At a Committee by desire of Captain Woodes Rogers, Captain Thomas Dover, and Captain Stephen Courtney, held on board the Duke. We have examined all Letters and Proceedings that happened at and after the taking of the Spanish Bark, and the reason of both Ships stay off of Teneriff, and amongst Canary Islands, and we do approve of all that was transacted and wrote; the major part of us having at the time when 'twas done advised the Commanders to do it. Witness our hands, Thomas Dover President, Stephen Courtney, Woodes Rogers, William Dampier, Edward Cook, Carleton Vanbrugh, William Bath, William Stratton, Robert Frye, Charles Pope, Thomas Glendall, John Bridge, John Ballet. Whilst the Committee were together, Mr. Vanbrugh complained I had not treated him as I ought, upon which I offered to refer it to all present, that we might not have needless misunderstandings at the beginning of our Voyage, and they came to the following Resolution. Whereas there has been some difference between Captain Woodes Rogers and Mr. Carleton Vanbrugh, the Ship's Agent, it being referred to the Council, we adjudged the said Mr. Vanbrugh to be much in the wrong. In witness whereof we have set our hands, the 24th of September, 1708. Thomas Dover President, Stephen Courtney, William Dampier, Edward Cook, Robert Frye, William Stratton, William Bath, Charles Pope, Thomas Glendall, John Bridge, John Ballet. September 25. This day, according to custom, we ducked those that had never passed the Tropic before. The manner of doing it was by a rope through a block from the main yard, to hoist 'em above halfway up to the yard, and let 'em fall at once into the water, having a stick crossed through their legs, and well fastened to the rope, that they might not be surprised and let go their hold. This proved of great use to our freshwater sailors, to recover the colour of their skins, which were grown very black and nasty. Those that we ducked after this manner 3 times were about 60, and others that would not undergo it chose to pay half a crown fine, the money to be levied and spent at a public meeting of all the Ships' Companies, when we returned to England. The Dutchmen and some Englishmen desired to be ducked, some 6, others 8, 10, and 12 times, to have the better title for being treated when they come home. Wind N.W. by W, and veering to the northward and eastward. September 26. Yesterday in the Afternoon we sold the loose Plunder of the Bark amongst the Sailors by Auction. Fair Weather, moderate Gales at N.N.E. had a very good Observation. Latitude 21° 33' North. September 29. Betwixt 9 and 10 at night, Sailor going up to furl the main top gallant sail, fell suddenly without any noise from the main top overboard, occasioned, as I supposed, by a fit. At 9 this morning we saw land and supposed it to be Sal, one of the Cape de Verd Islands, bearing S E by S distant at about 12 Leagues. At 12 o'clock at noon it bore ES.E. distant 4 Leagues. Fair Weather, smooth Water, fresh Gales at N.E. Latitude 17° 5' North, Longitude West from London 23° 16'. September 30. After being satisfied the Island was Sal, we stood from it West and W by N. for St. Vincent. At 4 o'clock Sal bore E by S, 1/4 S, distant 10 Leagues. At 6 St. Nicholas bore S.W. by W, distant 8 Leagues. We went with an easy sail till 4 this morning, and lay by to make the Islands, because we had none aboard either ship that was acquainted with them. When day broke we saw the Islands all in a range, much as is laid down in the Draughts. At 10 o'clock we anchor'd in the Bay of St. Vincent in 5 fathom Water. 'Tis a fine Bay. The northmost point bore north near a mile distant, and the westernmost port bore west distant about 2 miles. Monk's Rock, which is like a Sugar Loaf, high and round and bold on every side, lies almost in the Entrance of this fine sandy Bay on the west side of the Island. But nearest the North Point of the Bay, Sailors must be careful as they come in, not to run too near under the high Land of the North Point, for fear of being becalm'd, and sudden Flaws coming every way upon them, there being a small Shoal about 3 Ships length almost without the Point, but giving it a small Berth it's bold enough. We ran within 2 Cables length of the first round Point, next to the long sandy Bay, and came to an anchor in clean sandy Ground. Monk's Rock bore N.W. by N. distance 3/4 mile. The Body of the Island St. Antonio bore N.W. half North, distance 9 miles. This is a fine Bay and a good Landing, but the best at Northernmost Point. The Wood lies in the middle of the sandy Bay, and the Water between the North Point and the place where we anchor'd. There is good anchoring all over the Bay, and the Monk's Rock will direct any stranger into it, there being no other like it about this Island on the side opposite to St. Antonio. It blows here a constant Trade Wind betwixt the East by North and the N.N.E. except in the months of October, November, December, and January; it sometimes blows southerly with Tornadoes and Rain. October 1. We clear'd our Ship yesterday, but it blow'd too hard to row our Boat loads of empty Butts ashore, and we could do but little to wooding and watering, till this morning we were forced to get a Rope from the Ship to the watering place, which is a good half mile from our anchoring place, and so haul'd our empty Casks ashore by Boat loads, in order to have 'em burnt and clean'd in the inside, being Oil Casks. And for want of cleaning, our Water stunk insufferably. I borrow'd a Cooper from the Dutchess, and having 5 of my own, made quick dispatch. October 3. We sent our Boat over to St. Antonio, with Joseph Alexander, a good Linguist, and a respectful Letter to the Governor, who accounts himself a great man here, though very poor, to get in Truck for our Prize Goods what we wanted; they having plenty of Cattle, Goats, Hogs, Fowls, Melons, Potatoes, Limes, ordinary Brandy, Tobacco, Indian Corn, &c. Our People were very meanly stock'd with Clothes, and the Dutchess's Crew much worse; yet we are both forced to watch our Men very narrowly, and punish several of 'em, to prevent their selling what Clothes they have for Trifles to the Negroes that came over with little things from St. Antonio's. The People at all these Islands rather choose Clothing or Necessaries of any sort than Money, in return for what they sell. The Letter sent by the Linguist to the Governor of St. Antonio's, Sen. Joseph Rodriguez, was as follows: Honourable Sir, the bearer hereof is one of our Officers, whom we have sent to wait upon your Honour with our due respects, and to acquaint you with our arrival in the Bay of St. Vincent. And further, that being Subjects and Servants of Her Majesty the Queen of Great Britain, a high Ally and Confederate of his Sacred Majesty the King of Portugal, and having several Necessaries which we suppose the Inhabitants of your Island may want, and supposing they can accommodate us per contra, we are desirous of an immediate Traffic with them. We arrived 3 days ago, but being strangers were unacquainted in these parts, and not sooner inform'd of your Honour's residence in the neighbouring Islands, else we had been earlier with our respects. And if not too great a favour, we should be proud to see your Honour on board. Our stay cannot exceed 2 days more, so that dispatch is necessary. We have money or goods of several kinds to pay or exchange for what they bring. The bearer can inform your honor of the public occurrences of Europe and the great successes of the Confederate arms against the French and Spaniards, which no doubt must soon be followed with a lasting peace, which God grant. We subscribe ourselves with much respect, your honor's most obedient, humble servants, Woodes Rogers, Stephen Courtney. Section 4